the rule written in fear. The Galactic Council chamber floated in silent orbit around a brilliant blue star, its colossal structure shimmering with layers of transparent alloy and ancient stone. Inside the chamber, hundreds of representatives from across the galaxy sat in tiered circles, their forms ranging from towering crystalline beings to small insectoid diplomats perched atop glowing platforms. For centuries, this hall had been the center of interstellar diplomacy, a place where wars were prevented, alliances forged, and history quietly shaped. But today, the atmosphere felt heavy. An unease lingered among the delegates as a massive holographic display flickered to life in the center of the chamber. The image showed a small yellow star system with a single highlighted planet. Terra Outpost, a human colony. Murmurs spread through the chamber as the system rotated slowly in the hologram. The colony was insignificant by most galactic standards, a remote mining world on the edge of explored space, populated by barely 3,000 humans. It had little strategic value and even less military protection. Yet the council had gathered in emergency session because of one alarming report. The Zerathi Dominion was preparing to invade it. At the center of the chamber, an elderly figure slowly approached the speaking platform. His tall frame was draped in dark ceremonial robes that shimmered faintly in the artificial starlight. His skin had the pale gray tone of the ancient Thalkori, one of the oldest known species in the galaxy. This was Archivist Kelvar, the council's most respected historian. When he began to speak, the chamber grew quiet. The Zerathi fleet will reach Terra within 2 of your standard days, Kelvar said calmly. His voice carried a quiet authority that silenced even the most restless delegates. They intend to seize the colony and claim the system as Dominion territory. Across the chamber, a towering reptilian figure rose abruptly from its platform. The Zerathi ambassador's armored hide glinted under the chamber lights, and his yellow eyes narrowed with clear irritation. "This council wastes time," the ambassador growled. "The system is unclaimed by treaty. Humans hold it weakly. We merely take what they cannot defend." A ripple of tension moved through the room. Kelvar studied the ambassador for a moment before responding. "You believe this action will be simple," the historian said quietly. "But history suggests otherwise." The Zerathi ambassador scoffed loudly. "Humans," he said with mocking disbelief. "A young species with scattered colonies and fragile politics. They fight among themselves more than anyone else." Several delegates shifted uneasily. Kelvar folded his long hands behind his back. "That is what many believed centuries ago." With a small gesture, the historian activated the holographic display again. The image shifted from Terra to a series of ancient star systems marked by battle symbols. "These systems," Kelvar said, "belong to powers far greater than humanity during its early expansion." The display highlighted several names long forgotten by modern civilizations. The Dravic Slavers, the Karate Empire, the Valorian Coalition. Each one had attempted to exploit human territory, and each one believed humans would surrender, Kelvar continued. The hologram showed fleets burning, shattered worlds, and abandoned war stations drifting in empty space. They did not. The Zerathi ambassador leaned forward impatiently. "History lessons do not frighten the Dominion." Kelvar met the ambassador's gaze calmly. "The Dravic slavers once captured an entire human colony," he said. "They believed humans would accept their fate." The display showed a prison world. Instead, the prisoners built weapons from mining tools and destroyed the slaver fleet from within. The hologram changed again. The Karate Empire invaded 3 human systems at once. Explosions flashed across the display. Humans united every rival faction on their homeworld and fought until the empire collapsed. The ambassador remained silent now, but his expression hardened. Kelvar's voice grew quieter. "You misunderstand humanity." The historian turned slowly to face the council. "Humans are not the strongest species in this galaxy," he said, "nor the most advanced." A murmur of agreement rippled across the chamber. "But they possess something rarer than power. The display zoomed in on Nova Terra once more. Humans do not stop. The chamber fell into uneasy silence. They adapt faster than expected, Kelvar continued. They fight harder than logic allows. And when threatened, he paused. They unite. Across the chamber, several delegates shifted nervously. The Zerathi ambassador finally spoke again, his voice sharp with annoyance. Are you suggesting the Dominion should fear a mining colony of farmers and engineers? Kelvar looked directly at him. No. The historian's voice remained calm. I am suggesting you should fear what happens after you attack them. A brief silence followed. Then the ambassador laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that echoed across the chamber. This council spreads superstition, he declared loudly. There is no ancient rule, only cowardice. He turned toward the exit platform, where a projection of the Zerathi fleet now appeared. Hundreds of warships already accelerating toward human space. The Dominion will claim Nova Terra, he announced. Kelvar watched the fleet projection silently. The ambassador paused before leaving the chamber. If humans object, he added coldly, they may try to stop us. The hologram vanished as the ambassador departed. A heavy silence filled the council chamber. Kelvar stood motionless for several moments before speaking again. When young civilizations enter the galaxy, he said quietly, they often ignore its oldest lessons. The historian looked back at the image of Nova Terra, a small world, barely defended, seemingly insignificant. They believe power guarantees victory, he continued. Kelvar finally turned toward the council. But power has never been the reason humanity wins. The old Thalcori's voice dropped to a near whisper. They believe humans fear war. His eyes narrowed slightly. But humans fear only one thing. The chamber held its breath. Kelvar spoke the final words slowly. Losing the people they love. Far beyond the council chamber, the Zerathi fleet continued its journey toward Nova Terra. And unknowingly, toward the oldest mistake in galactic history. The first mistake. The small colony of Nova Terra sat beneath a pale orange sky, its mining towers stretching like thin metal skeletons across the dusty plains. Cargo haulers drifted slowly between landing pads, while automated drills hummed deep beneath the planet's surface, pulling valuable minerals from the red soil. For most of its settlers, life on Nova Terra had always been quiet. Simple. 3,000 people lived here. Miners, engineers, farmers, and families who had chosen distance from the crowded core worlds. They were used to hard work and isolation, but they had never imagined they would become the center of a galactic crisis. The warning arrived just after sunrise. High above the planet, the orbital defense satellite detected the first hyperspace rupture. At first, the system flagged it as a passing cargo convoy. Then another rupture appeared. Then 10 more. Within seconds, the sky filled with alerts. The station commander stared in disbelief as the sensor grid updated. 200 warships. The Zerathi Dominion had arrived. Massive triangular cruisers began emerging from hyperspace like dark shadows, tearing through reality. Their hulls were armored in black alloy, glowing faintly with blue energy lines that pulsed along their surface like veins. They formed a blockade around the planet in perfect military formation. On Nova Terra, every communication screen suddenly flashed with a new incoming transmission. The colony governor, Elena Ward, stood inside the Central Command building when the message appeared. The image of a towering reptilian alien filled the display. Its golden armor gleamed beneath harsh lighting, and its long, scaled face twisted into something that almost resembled a smile. I am Commander Karzeth of the Zerathi Dominion, the creature announced. His voice echoed through every speaker across the colony. This planet now falls under Dominion authority. A brief pause followed. You will surrender all facilities and resources within 1 hour. His eyes narrowed slightly. Resistance will result in termination. The transmission ended. Inside the command room, silence fell. Several officers stared at the screen in shock. 200 warships, one technician whispered. We don't even have a defense fleet. Governor Ward crossed her arms slowly. How many orbital cannons do we have left? 4, the technician replied nervously. and they're mining defense models. Good enough, Ward said. She turned toward the communications officer. Open a channel. A moment later, her message was transmitted directly to the Zerathi flagship. The governor stood straight as she spoke. This is Nova Terra Outpost. You are entering civilian territory under human protection. Her voice remained calm. You will leave this system immediately. The response came quickly. A deep rumbling laugh echoed across the transmission. Commander Karzeth leaned forward on the screen. Your species is entertaining, he said. Then his expression hardened. Destroy their satellites. Above the planet, the Zerathi fleet opened fire. Brilliant streaks of plasma tore across space, slamming into the colony's orbital defenses. One by one, the small satellites exploded into clouds of molten metal. Within seconds, Nova Terra lost its last line of protection. Dropships began descending through the atmosphere. Across the colony, alarms blared as settlers rushed to underground shelters. But something unexpected happened. The humans didn't surrender. In the mining tunnels beneath the surface, workers began welding heavy drill lasers onto mobile platforms. Engineers rerouted power from the colony grid into improvised defense turrets. Farmers armed agricultural drones with explosive charges. They knew the truth. They couldn't win, but they refused to give up their home without a fight. The first Zerathi dropship landed near the central mining facility. As the ramp lowered, armored Dominion soldiers stormed forward. They didn't make it 10 steps. A mining laser burst from the shadows, slicing across the landing zone like a beam of sunlight through glass. The dropship erupted in flames as humans opened fire from hidden positions. Across Nova Terra, similar battles ignited. Improvised barricades blocked the streets. Homemade explosives detonated beneath advancing alien troops. Colonists fought with whatever they could find: tools, rifles, drones, and raw determination. The Zerathi forces eventually pushed forward through sheer numbers. But the resistance slowed them at every turn. Commander Karzeth watched the battle reports from orbit with growing irritation. These are civilians, one of his officers reported. Then why are they fighting like soldiers? Karzeth snapped. Hours later, the colony finally fell. The surviving humans were captured. The Zerathi flag rose over the central command building. Victory belonged to the Dominion, but it had cost them far more than expected. Hundreds of soldiers were dead. Several dropships destroyed. Infrastructure damaged beyond immediate use. To Karzeth, however, the losses meant little. This colony will be repaired, he said coldly. Broadcast the victory. Moments later, Dominion channels transmitted the news across nearby systems. Nova Terra had been conquered, but deep beneath the colony's ruined communications tower, a single damaged transmitter flickered weakly to life. A young technician named Marcus Hale crawled through the smoke-filled control room, clutching a portable power cell. Blood ran down his arm, but he ignored the pain. He connected the power supply to the transmitter. The screen flickered once, then stabilized. Marcus began typing quickly. One final message, a signal powerful enough to reach human space. His voice trembled as he recorded the transmission. Nova Terra Outpost to Earth Command. He paused as distant footsteps echoed in the hallway. Colony has fallen, he continued. Zerathi Dominion responsible. A heavy thud shook the door. Marcus swallowed. Civilian casualties high. The door began to bend under repeated impacts. He finished the message quickly, requesting assistance. Then he pressed send. The signal shot into space, racing across the stars toward humanity's core worlds. Moments later, Zerathi soldiers burst into the room. But it was too late. The message had already left the system. And somewhere far away, humanity had just received the news. Humanity responds. The message from Nova Terra reached human space 17 minutes after it was sent. It arrived quietly. Just another priority signal entering the vast network of communication relays that connected humanity's scattered colonies. At first, the system processed it like any other distress call. Then the words were decoded. Nova Terra Outpost. Colony has fallen. Zerathi Dominion responsible. Within seconds, The message was forwarded to military command centers across human space. Within minutes, it reached Earth. Inside the United Earth Defense Command, the room fell silent as the final part of the transmission played. The image of the wounded technician flickered briefly before the signal cut to static. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Admiral Rachel Navarro leaned forward slowly. "Confirm the source," she said. A communications officer nodded grimly. "Signal verified, ma'am. Nova Terra." Another screen displayed the colony's last known status. Population: 3,042 civilians. Navarro exhaled slowly. "Casualty estimates?" "Unknown." The Admiral looked toward the large star map dominating the center of the room. Nova Terra glowed as a small blue marker on the edge of human territory. Around it, new signals were appearing. Zerathi fleet signatures. 200 ships. Navarro's voice became cold. "Alert the Defense Council." Across human space, the message spread faster than anyone expected. News networks picked it up within the hour. Images of Nova Terra, once a quiet mining colony, filled every broadcast screen. Families watched in stunned silence as reports confirmed the invasion. People began asking the same question everywhere. Why? But the anger came quickly. Across Earth cities, protests erupted outside Zerathi embassies. In the colonies, recruitment centers overflowed with volunteers demanding to join the military. Governments that had argued for decades over trade routes and border disputes suddenly stopped fighting each other. For the first time in years, every major human nation agreed on something. This could not stand. 12 hours after the message arrived, the Defense Council met. Representatives from dozens of human worlds appeared on a massive holographic table inside Earth's orbital command station. Admiral Navarro stood at the center. "The Zerathi Dominion invaded a civilian colony," she said bluntly. 3,000 settlers with minimal defenses. One of the council members spoke immediately. "Do we know if any survivors remain?" "Unclear," Navarro replied. "But the Dominion has occupied the planet." The room fell quiet. Another council representative leaned forward. "So what's our response?" Navarro didn't hesitate. "We take it back." The holographic star map shifted as dozens of fleet icons appeared across human space. Shipyards activated. Defense fleets mobilized. Emergency manufacturing protocols were triggered across multiple systems. But something unexpected happened next. Civilian traffic flooded the network. Cargo ships, mining vessels, transport carriers, thousands of non-military ships began requesting authorization to join the operation. Some carried supplies. Others offered to transport soldiers. Many simply wanted to fight. Within hours, the operation had grown far beyond a normal military response. Humanity had entered total response protocol. Factories that once produced consumer technology now built ammunition and armor. Space stations converted cargo containers into makeshift fighter bays. Even outdated vessels were refitted with weapons. One officer, studying the mobilization reports, shook his head in disbelief. "This isn't a counterattack," he whispered. It wasn't. It was something much larger. 2 days after Nova Terra fell, the Zerathi fleet still held orbit around the planet. Commander Karzeth stood inside the bridge of his flagship, observing the colony below. Zerathi engineers were already preparing to convert the mining infrastructure into Dominion property. The victory broadcast had spread through nearby systems, earning praise from Dominion leadership. To Karzeth, the operation had been successful. A minor colony taken with minimal effort. A small demonstration of Zerathi power. Then the sensors began to scream. An officer rushed toward him. "Commander, hyperspace rupture detected." Karzeth frowned. "Reinforcements." The officer shook his head slowly. "Unknown signatures." Another alarm echoed across the bridge. "Second rupture detected." Then another, and another. Within seconds, dozens of hyperspace tears opened across the outer edge of the system. Ships began emerging. The Zerathi officers stared at the tactical display in confusion. At first, they expected a small human retaliation fleet. Maybe a dozen warships. Instead, the number kept rising. 20 ships. 50. 100, then hundreds more. Human vessels poured into the system in every shape and size. Sleek military destroyers formed battle lines. Heavy cruisers powered their weapons. But behind them came something stranger. Cargo freighters with railguns welded onto their hulls. Mining vessels equipped with improvised missile racks. Civilian transports carrying thousands of armed volunteers. The sensor officer's voice trembled. "Commander, we're counting over 2,000 ships." Karzeth stared at the screen. "That's impossible." More human ships arrived every second. The fleet filled the system like a storm of steel. One of the Zerathi officers whispered quietly, "This is not a rescue mission." No, it wasn't. On the command deck of the human flagship USS Resolute, Admiral Navarro stood, watching the tactical display. The massive fleet behind her stretched across half the system. A communications officer looked up. "Dominion fleet requesting identification." Navarro crossed her arms. "Send them a message." Moments later, a transmission reached the Zerathi flagship. Karzeth activated the screen. A human admiral appeared. Her expression was calm. "Cold. You invaded a civilian colony," Navarro said. Karzeth tried to maintain his composure. "This world now belongs to the Dominion." Navarro shook her head slightly. "No." She looked directly into the camera. "It belongs to the people you killed." The transmission ended. Seconds later, the human fleet opened fire. The rule rewritten in blood. The first volley from the human fleet lit the darkness of space like a newborn star. Thousands of missiles erupted from launch bays across the massive formation, streaking toward the Zerathi fleet in blazing arcs of white fire. Railgun rounds followed seconds later. Solid metal projectiles accelerated to terrifying speeds, slamming through the void faster than any conventional defense system could track. The Zerathi fleet scrambled to respond. "Shields up!" Commander Karzeth roared from the bridge of his flagship. "Return fire!" Energy cannons fired in rapid bursts, filling space with violent flashes of plasma. Several incoming missiles exploded before reaching their targets, but there were simply too many. The first human barrage struck the outer Zerathi cruisers like a hammer. One ship vanished in a burst of blue light as its shield collapsed instantly. Another spun wildly after a railgun round tore straight through its engine core. Within seconds, chaos erupted across the Dominion formation. The Zerathi officers had expected retaliation. They had not expected this. The human fleet did not fight with careful formations or predictable tactics. Instead, their ships surged forward aggressively, overwhelming every defensive line the Dominion attempted to establish. On the bridge of the USS Resolute, Admiral Rachel Navarro watched the battle unfold with steady focus. "Primary objective?" one officer asked. Navarro didn't hesitate. "Liberate Nova Terra." Her voice hardened slightly. "And remove every Dominion ship in this system." The human fleet obeyed. Fighter squadrons launched from converted cargo carriers, swarming towards Zerathi warships like metallic insects. Improvised attack drones followed close behind, detonating themselves against shield generators and weapons arrays. Then the larger human vessels pushed into close range. A mining ship, its hull still scarred from years of asteroid drilling, accelerated directly toward a Zerathi cruiser. "Collision course detected," a Dominion officer shouted. The cruiser tried to maneuver away. Too late. The mining vessel slammed into its side with catastrophic force, ripping both ships apart in a violent explosion. More human ships pressed forward without hesitation. They fought like people who had already accepted the possibility of death. And that terrified the Zerathi. Commander Karzeth stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. "This is madness," he muttered. Another Dominion ship vanished from the display. How many enemy vessels remain?" he demanded. The sensor officer hesitated. "Commander, they are still arriving." Even as the battle raged, new human ships continued emerging from hyperspace. Civilian transports, reserve fleets, long-range cruisers from distant colonies, all answering the same call. For every human ship destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. Meanwhile, Zerathi losses climbed rapidly. One of Karzeth's advisors leaned closer. "Commander, their strategy makes no sense." He gestured toward the display. "They're not fighting to gain tactical advantage." Karzeth stared at the screen. Human ships ignored optimal firing positions. They risked dangerous maneuvers. They sacrificed vessels to destroy single targets. The advisor finished quietly. "They are fighting emotionally." The realization struck Karzeth like a cold blade. These humans weren't attacking for territory. They weren't negotiating. They weren't even trying to minimize their own losses. They were fighting for something far more dangerous: revenge. Hours later, the battle was over. The once powerful Zerathi fleet had been reduced to drifting wreckage scattered across the system. Burning fragments of Dominion warships floated silently in orbit above Nova Terra. The few surviving Zerathi vessels fled into hyperspace. Human ships did not pursue. Instead, dozens of transports descended toward the colony below. Nova Terra had suffered heavy damage during the invasion, but the main settlements still stood. Dominion soldiers had already begun abandoning their positions once the battle in orbit turned against them. Human rescue teams spread across the colony immediately. Survivors were found hiding in shelters, tunnels, and damaged buildings. Medical crews worked tirelessly to treat the wounded, while engineers restored basic power systems. In a central command facility, the human flag was raised once again. But the war was not over. Within days, human fleets pushed beyond Nova Terra and into Zerathi-controlled space. The Dominion had expected humanity to reclaim their colony. They had not expected what came next. System after system fell under relentless human assault. Military outposts were destroyed. Shipyards were bombarded. Dominion supply routes collapsed as human fleets advanced deeper into their territory. Every battle followed the same brutal pattern. The humans did not stop. Months later, the once proud Zerathi Dominion stood on the edge of total collapse. Their fleets were shattered, their defenses overwhelmed. For the first time in their long history, the Dominion requested an emergency ceasefire. The surrender transmission reached the Galactic Council shortly afterward. Inside the council chamber, representatives watched the message in stunned silence. The Zerathi ambassador, once arrogant and proud, now spoke with visible exhaustion. "The Dominion accepts responsibility for the attack on Nova Terra," he said quietly. "We agree to withdraw from all human territories and provide full reparations." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. High above the chamber floor, Archivist Kelvar stood watching the recording. The ancient historian had seen this pattern before. Young civilizations often believed they understood the galaxy, but experience taught otherwise. After the meeting ended, Kelvar returned to the council archives. There, among thousands of recorded histories, he created a new entry. The title was simple: The Zerathi War. He recorded the final summary carefully. The Zerathi Dominion believed humanity was weak. They believed the ancient warnings were superstition. Kelvar paused before finishing the entry. Then he wrote the final line: "A lesson the galaxy continues to learn." He leaned back slightly, because the truth had never changed. Across countless star systems, the same rule had survived for centuries. A rule written not in law, but in memory. And now, once again, in blood. Do not mess with humans.